Wherever you go in the countryside, people are talking about drought, and gardeners in particular are really up against it. We in Cornwall have been lucky up to now. We had a lot of rain during the first week of June, and then the week afterwards was sea fret and drizzle. So up until mid-June, everything was fine in the garden, unlike much of the rest of southern England. But today, 6 weeks into the drought, and with another 10 days of dry weather forecast, not necessarily heat waves, but dry weather, we can already see the toll it is taking, particularly on rhododendrons. And I'm standing beside a big leaf rhododendron which has quite literally dropped its leaves. It produced a bit of new growth earlier in the year when it was wetter, but these two plants are growing underneath beech trees which are greedy for the water, and the plant behind me has still survived, but I can assure you that these two are going to be dead just like this plant over here, which died completely in the drought last summer. And the threat of big leaf rhododendrons from any sort of drought, as we first discovered in 1976, is enormous. But it's not just the big leaf rhododendrons that are suffering, as we'll see. So this little clump of rhododendron Princess Alice was planted in 1922. So it's 4 years old, growing away very nicely. But as you can see now, the sun cuts in along the front of this clump, and the middle plant of 3 along the front is obviously dead. Even if it rained tonight, that plant is not going to recover, and unfortunately that's it. And if we look nearby at a clump of Lady Alice Fitzwilliam, we see exactly the same thing. The plant which is hottest has already died. The last few leaves are still looking brown and charred. The plant next to it just got a little bit more shade from the camellia beside it, and it's still okay. But in another 10 days, who knows? So the obvious answer is perhaps we should go watering. But if we just wander along here, we begin to see the scale of the problem and how watering anything but newly planted plants is more or less impossible. So these young layers of rhododendron falconeri, which have been in the ground for about 5 years, they've dropped their leaves. They're probably capable of surviving, but only if they get rain in the next week. If we look down below, we see another rhododendron cynogrande which has got reasonable new growth, but gone even further. And if we look up the other side, we see another rhododendron cynogrande which never quite got its new growth out, and clearly that is going to die as well. If we just move a little bit further down the hill and look at the original clump, if we look at the original clump of rhododendron falconeri, these are 60 or 70-year-old plants, wonderful bark. The leaves are not yet drooping because the canopy which the tree makes is shading the ground and retaining just a little bit more moisture. But everywhere you look, you can see leaves are dropping. The plant is not well and desperately needs rain. If we were going to water, where do you stop? Where do you start? We have our own water, so that's not really a problem. But this drought certainly is. And if we just wander along the path a little way, here is a Gaultheria species that I photographed in flower only 3 weeks ago. You can see the flowers all shriveled up. It was doing fantastically well, but now has joined the dodo, as you can see. Now here is rhododendron pseudo-chrysanthemum. It came into new growth beautifully, had these wonderful orange new leaves with this beautiful orange indumentum, but 4 weeks of drought, and I'm afraid it's terminally dead, as is the plant behind it. But strangely, Rhododendron yakisomenum is looking absolutely fine. I suppose that Rhododendron yakisomenum is used to more heat. It grows out in open hillsides in a mountain off Japan, in an island off Japan rather, and it's possibly more used to the sort of heat that we've been getting, whereas this poor thing clearly wasn't. But it's not all doom and gloom, and we should never allow ourselves to become too gloomy. I'm standing beside a large bed of Azalea ledifolia alba, which was smashed to smithereens in Hurricane Goretti in January, and we cut all these plants down, and the deciduous azaleas behind the evergreen ones were cut down at the same time, and they were cut down in time to catch the rain we had in the early part of the year and in June, and look how well they've reshot. Isn't going to take very many years before they're back to the same size as they were before the trees crashed into them, and they've just so far escaped the worst of the drought because their roots had the water that they needed and the vigor to start reshooting. And the same is true of the camellias over here. This plant too was smashed to smithereens by Hurricane Goretti. So like all good camellias, we gave it a prune, and look how vigorously it is starting to reshoot despite the drought. Wherever it was cut back, the branches have got a multitude of new shoots, and they're all still looking healthy. Camellias are tap-rooted plants. They're going much lower for their water than the rhododendrons. And if you look around behind you, you see that the magnolias also are not suffering at all as yet from the drought. And there's even a few secondary flowers on a magnolia just beside us. Anyway, before we get carried away with things reshooting, let's just go and look at a flower and cheer ourselves all up a bit. So let's cheer ourselves up with the early flowering of EUCRYPHIA nymansensis Nymansay. Usually this is out in August, sometimes towards the end of August, but this year in the drought, the flowers are larger than ever and very prolific. And beside it, we've got a Catalpa bignonoides, which is also nicely in flower. And you see the centers of the flowers have a lovely purple and orange combination in the individual flowers. And if we just look up the drive a little way, we see some Hydrangea paniculata, 3 different varieties, and flanked at the back by Hydrangea villosa. They're looking a bit droopy in the leaves, but the flowers are still handing up. And even in the extreme drought, there's always something good to enjoy, so let's not be too depressed.